The year was 1066, a turning point in the history of England and, in many ways, the medieval world. For decades, the Vikings had been the most feared force in Europe, relentless Norse warriors, skilled navigators, and almost unbeatable raiders. But that year, their reign of terror and conquest was about to come to an end. Harold Godwinson, newly crowned king of the Anglo-Saxons, had taken the throne amid an unprecedented threat. To the north, a Viking army led by the fearsome king of Norway, Harald Hardrada, known as the Ruthless, crossed the North Sea with thousands of warriors seeking the English crown. And beside him marched Tostig Godwinson, Harold's exiled brother, driven by ambition and a thirst for revenge. Destiny was preparing for a monumental collision. Within hours, what began as a simple invasion would transform the north of England into a legendary battlefield where courage, strategy, and brutality would collide in a clash that would be remembered forever: the Battle of Stamford Bridge. As Harold Godwinson consolidated his newly won throne, a looming shadow approached from the north of England. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway and the last great Viking conqueror, was leading a fleet of nearly 300 ships carrying around 10,000 fierce warriors, men hardened by cold, violence, and death. His objective was simple and ambitious: to claim the English crown. Marching at his side was Tostig Godwinson, the exiled brother of the English king. Humiliated and stripped of his earldom, Tostig saw in this invasion a chance for revenge, and perhaps even a path to power. The alliance between the Norwegian king and the English trader was a threat Harold Godwinson could hardly ignore. Before Stamford Bridge, the Vikings had already demonstrated their strength. At the Battle of Fulford, two local lords, Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria, attempted to resist, but were defeated. The city of York quickly fell, surrendering and offering hostages and supplies to the invaders. Harald Hardrada believed the path to the English crown was open, and that resistance would be minimal. But Harold Godwinson was no ordinary king. He was about to accomplish an almost legendary feat, marching against the enemy with a speed and discipline few could imagine. The collision between Anglo-Saxons and Vikings was imminent, and it would forever change the fate of England and the Viking Age itself. While the Vikings rested in York, confident after their victory at Fulford, Harold Godwinson was preparing his army for an almost legendary feat. In just 4 days, he covered roughly 190 miles, marching from London to the north toward the city of York, pushing the limits of medieval mobility. For comparison, most armies at the time marched no more than 15 to 20 miles per day. Harold and his warriors advanced with virtually no rest, carrying armor, shields, axes, and swords, enduring rain, exhaustion, and uneven roads. Speed was essential. Surprising the enemy was the only chance to face the Vikings under favorable conditions. Every step carried tension. The soldiers knew that if they were delayed or became too fatigued, the battle could be lost before it even began. But Harold's determination was contagious. The courage and discipline of his men turned this march into a weapon as powerful as any sword or bow. When they finally caught sight of York, the English army was exhausted, but morale was high. The element of surprise would be decisive. The Vikings, unprepared and relaxed, did not expect Harold to arrive so quickly. The fate of the battle and of the Viking Age in England was about to be decided. At dawn on September 25, 1066, Harold Godwinson and his army appeared unexpectedly over the hills near York. The late September sun lit the fields where many Vikings were resting, unprepared for the clash that was about to unfold. Some were even washing themselves in the river Derwent, confident that no battle would take place that day. The surprise was absolute. Before launching the attack, Harold sought one last chance at negotiation. He met with Tostig, his traitorous brother, and with Hardrada, the Viking king. Tostig was tempted with the promise of regaining his earldom if he turned against Hardrada, but his ambition and pride kept him from accepting. The tension was palpable. Brothers face to face, armies ready for death. The first clash occurred on the narrow bridge of Stamford. Legend speaks of a lone Viking, possibly a berserker, who stayed behind to cover the retreat of his companions. With mighty swings of his great axe, he struck down any English soldier who dared to cross the bridge. For several minutes, the Anglo-Saxons were stunned, unable to advance in force. Arrows flew, shields clashed, and the quiet fields echoed with the clang of steel. This initial confrontation not only delayed the English, but also tested their courage, patience, and discipline. Every blow, every movement was decisive. The battle had only just begun, and the bridge at Stamford would become a stage of heroism, sacrifice, and legends that would echo through the centuries. With the bridge finally crossed, the English army advanced against the main Viking force. Realizing the surprise and scale of the attack, Harald Hardrada ordered his men to form a shield wall, the legendary defensive formation that made the Vikings almost impenetrable. Men stood side by side, shields raised, axes and swords at the ready, determined to hold their ground until death. Banners with golden ravens fluttered in the wind, symbols of Norse boldness and pride. The clash was brutal. Anglo-Saxons and Vikings met in hand-to-hand combat, each axe swing and each thrust deciding the fate of men and kings. The metallic noise was deafening. Helmets clanged, shields splintered, and war cries echoed across the fields of Stamford Bridge. Despite the defenders' courage and skill, the English held the numerical advantage, and Harold's discipline ensured that fresh reinforcements continuously reached the front line. The turning point came when a well-aimed arrow struck Hardrada. The mighty and feared king fell, his blood staining the grass that had once seen only glory. His death demoralized the Vikings, leaving Tostig alone to command the remaining forces. Even so, the traitor stood firm, trying to reorganize his men to resist. But English superiority was relentless. The shield wall began to collapse, shields fell, and Viking discipline was not enough to halt the advance. The epic struggle turned into a massacre. With every step the Anglo-Saxons gained, England moved closer to ending the Viking invasion and to a victory that, though temporary, would forever shape the fate of the island and bring an end to the great era of Norse conquerors. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the Battle of Stamford Bridge reached its end. The Viking army, surrounded and exhausted, no longer had the strength to resist. The few warriors still holding their weapons fell one by one, and the defense that had once seemed invincible now shattered under the relentless English advance. Tostig, desperate, tried to regroup his men and regain some control, but it was already too late. The death of Hardrada, combined with Harold's numerical and disciplined superiority, made any further resistance pointless. Only a small fraction of the Vikings managed to escape, running toward the ships that awaited them, while the rest of the army met their deaths in the fields near York. Silence fell over Stamford Bridge. The smell of blood and smoke still hung in the air, a lingering reminder of the violence and courage that had marked that morning. England was, at least for a moment, safe. The last great Viking king had fallen, and the long era of Norse invasions on the island had come to an end. But the victory carried a heavy cost. Harold's army, exhausted and wounded, barely had time to celebrate. On the horizon, another threat was rising from the south. William, Duke of Normandy, who within weeks would challenge Harold in another battle that would forever change the fate of England. Harold Godwinson's victory at Stamford Bridge marked a decisive moment in the history of England. For the first time in centuries, the Vikings, those feared and nearly invincible warriors of the northern seas, had been defeated on English soil. The great era of Norse invasions had come to an end. But the victory did not come without cost. Exhausted and wounded armies, along with hundreds of dead scattered across the fields, reminded everyone of the price of war. Harold, despite his triumph, barely had time to breathe. The most dangerous threat still lay to the south. William, the Duke of Normandy, was landing on the English coast with his fleet and army. The king would now have to march once again, facing another challenge that would decide not only his fate, but the future of all England. Stamford Bridge became a lesson in courage, strategy, and sacrifice. Every soldier, every shield, every axe used that day became the stuff of legend. The sun set over the battlefield, ending not just a fight, but an entire era of Norse conquerors. And if you want to continue exploring epic battles, heroes, and legends of history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any episode of the stories that shaped the world.